Hey everybody, welcome to the videos for lineup building for week 13 of the NFL season over on DraftKings, over cash game and GPP strategy. And I'm really looking forward to this one this week because there's so many good plays on the slate. It's going to be kind of hard to figure out exactly where we want to go, but we're going to try to do just that in this week's video. And if you do find it helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, kind of fish number over on Patreon. Now's the best time to do so since we're in the beginning of the month. If you like the free content over here on YouTube, I'm sure you'll like the extra content over on Patreon, including the optimizer, ownership projections, which are extremely important each every single weekend when it comes to playing DFS, projections, cheat sheets, all that fun stuff. Link can be found down below. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know this by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, when you sign up on PrizePicks, you can get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. And it's definitely been really fun and profitable as well. So I really would highly recommend checking it out. But I think that's it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. My disclaimer, as I always say before I start this video, the purpose of this is not for me to give you guys a lineup. I am not sure if I'm going to use any of the lineups that I build in this video. I'm just showing you guys a process I use each and every single weekend to build a theoretical cash game lineup, going over a process I use that you can apply to your own favorite players and build your own lineups. Plus, there's plenty of news that can drop by the time Sunday kickoff rolls around and just about anything else. So, just like I said, we're just going over a process of the information that we have as of right now, what I think looks like a pretty darn good lineup. So, as I always say for cash games, I always start the running back position because they're the most important. Those are the guys that are going to touch the ball the most. And I want to make sure that the guys I want in my lineup, not just some random 4K running back that's going to get like 20% of these snaps. So we're going to head over to the running back position. And I think there's two ways we can go this week. And I'm actually going to build like two lineups, try to go two different directions here. Because I think in cash games, you can either spend up for Jonathan Taylor this weekend, or you can spend all the way up for Cooper Kupp, a wide receiver. I think you're going to have to do one of the two options because the pricing is pretty soft. And you can definitely afford one or the other. I've played around with some dummy lineups, and it's definitely possible to play Jonathan Taylor or Cooper Kupp and still put together a very good looking lineup this weekend. So the first one we're going to do is spending up for Jonathan Taylor. Then I think the next one we're going to do is take Taylor out and then spend up for Cooper Kupp, and we'll see what the difference looks like. So for me, since this is the Jonathan Taylor lineup, he's going to be the first guy we plug in, and there's really no reason not to like Jonathan Taylor here. He's a 10-point favorite. He's been an absolute tear for about a month or two now. And he's had a string of really easy matchups this year, but the past 2 weeks he's had some of the tougher matchups in the NFL versus the run this year, and he scored 56.4 and 19.7 points. Now he gets the Houston Texans, where the Colts offensive line should be able to manhandle this defensive line. I mean, just give me the Jonathan Taylor. I know he's very expensive, but you can afford him this week. There's plenty of cheap value running backs and wide receivers if you want. And especially at the tight end position, we're all punting tight end this week with either Foster Moreau or James O'Shaughnessy. So, I mean, you could easily fit in Jonathan Taylor, and he should smash in the spot. He is very expensive, but he's kind of like the new Derrick Henry these days. Just doesn't get quite the volume. He's involved in the passing game and is very efficient, averaging close to 6 yards per carry. And yes, I know he's very expensive, but I am currently projecting him to be the second highest owned running back on the entire slate, only behind Antonio Gibson. So Jonathan Taylor, by all means, come on down, and you can enter this lineup as our first guy. So at this point, we can probably plug in two more running backs. Because in cash games, I typically go with 3 running back builds. That's just a preference of mine, although that's what most people will tell you to do, and I would totally agree with them. And that's usually what projections do as well. It feels better if you're playing cash games. In tournaments, you don't have to do this, but in cash games, just locking up as much volume as you can is definitely the safest and best way to go. So we're going to have to find some mid-range running backs. Now, I do like several other running backs that are up here. I love Joe Mixon in tournaments this weekend. I like Alexander Madison in tournaments. I love Leonard Fournette. Everyone's going to be in the passing game for the Buccaneers, so I think Leonard Fournette probably gets overlooked once again, especially with the price increase to over $7,000. But for me, this like low 6K to upper 5K, or I guess mid 5K range is just loaded with good running backs. We have Darrell Henderson, Eli Mitchell, James Conner, Antonio Gibson, and Jamal Williams down here at $5,400. Like, it is completely loaded, and that's why I was saying earlier in the week that it's kind of tough this week, not just because there's not any good plays. There's just too many good plays, personally. It's like hard to pick which one you want. Like, usually in a given week, Eli Mitchell would be like the stone cold chalk running back at $6,000 with no Deebo Samuel facing Seattle. James Conner with no Chase Edmonds, Kyler Murray looking better. It's like, oh my gosh, there's just so many good plays to try to fit in here. Jamal Williams with no DeAndre Swift. But with no J.D. McKissick, I think Antonio Gibson's probably the best play here at $5,700. He had 34 total touches last week on Monday night versus Seattle Seahawks, and that was just J.D. McKissick playing. J.D. McKissick did get hurt at one point, but that was later on in the game, but he still had 29 carries, 111 yards, didn't get to the end zone, but 7 targets, 7 catches for 35 yards, 26.6 fantasy points. That was the most touches he's seen in a game in his entire career. $5,700. Facing the Raiders, the run defense really isn't that great. Hard to pass this up, especially with no JD McKissic. That's the thing. Like, he is going to be just pretty much the only guy back here besides maybe Patterson getting a few touches. But Antonio Gibson, $5,700 as a workhorse back, and he's going to be playing involved in the passing game because JD McKissic, the main pass catching back, is out, and Gibson already had 7 targets last week. So hard not to like Gibson here. So we're going to plug him in at $5,700 as our RB2. And I'm currently projecting these two to be the highest on running backs on the entire slate. So I just like jamming them in cash games. So we're going to move on to flex and just plug in our third running back here. And like I said, there's many ways you can go. You can go Eli Mitchell, James Conner. I like Jamal Williams though, $5,400. No DeAndre Swift. He's just going to be the only running back there. I don't think he's like the most amazing running back, but look at last week for Chicago. DeAndre Swift got hurt at one point. Was it in the late first quarter, early second quarter, somewhere around there? Got 20 total touches out of Jamal Williams. We're probably going to see a similar workload in this one. And if he's going to get us around 5 targets and around 15 carries, look, I don't care how talented a person is. The matchup's good versus Minnesota. I would take the volume at this price point. It's really hard to find volume like that at this price. Now, this week it's really not that hard because there's plenty of guys in this price range that you could easily play over Jamal Williams. But I am projecting him to be the third highest running back on the entire slate. I think a lot of people will end up going this route. Jamal Williams, Jonathan Taylor, and Tony Gibson in cash games. And it just makes sense. Like, Taylor's going to get you 20 plus touches. Tony Gibson's going to get you 20 plus touches. And Jamal Williams should probably slide it around like 15 to 20 something. So that's pretty good. And you still have around $5,000 left per player. Factor in a cheap defense and a cheap tight end. It's actually a very good way to start your shell cash game builds this week. So at this point, we can either go to the quarterback spot or we can work on some wide receivers. I think we could just probably plug in our quarterback. And it's really between 2 guys for me this weekend. I'm either going to play Tom Brady in cash or I'm going to play Justin Herbert. I've personally been finding myself having the money to spend up for Tom Brady. I realized it wasn't a great game for him last week. The Bucs scored around 40 points, but Tom Brady only had 12 fantasy points. Like, that's not going to happen often. Like, besides this game and the one versus Washington in Week 10, Tom Brady's been amazing for fantasy purposes, and I guess versus New England in Week 4. But, I mean, this guy is playing at MVP level. He's got great weapons to get the ball to. No Antonio Brown once again. I mean, that's a whole other situation besides the sprained ankle. Now we're dealing with a fake vax card and things like that. But he should be just fine. His pass catching options are cheap. So he's playing Atlanta. I have no concerns here for Tom Brady. I know they're big favorites, but if they end up blowing out Atlanta, Tom Brady probably already had a fantastic game. So I'll take 3 to 3.5 quarters out of Tom Brady. We should be just fine. Again, Justin Herbert, a very good play versus the Bengals. That game should be close and back and forth. But I like Chris Godwin a lot this week, so I'm just going to pair him up with Tom Brady. So I think that kind of hints at where we're going with wide receiver. Godwin did bust for us last week, but trust me, I have no hard feelings. That's like the first bust game that Chris Godwin has had this season. Besides that, he's been very consistent. Again, no Antonio Brown, guy that was averaging around 20% target share, 8-some targets per game. Take him out of the equation. Like I've been saying the past like month or so now, just a nice boost for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Mike Evans, he does have a very high ceiling, but he also has a very low floor as well. I realize Godwin, I guess, has a low floor as according to last week, but still at 5 targets. He'll be fine. I have no concerns here versus Atlanta. He's just too cheap, $6,600. Cheapest he's been since Week 8 versus New Orleans. So we're going to plug him in and just get that pairing with Tom Brady. You don't always have to pair your quarterback with a wide receiver in cash games, but if you're using a guy like Tom Brady is not going to get there by himself. One of his pass catching options or multiple of these guys have to go off because Brady, unlike a guy like Jalen Hurts, you don't have to use any of his pass catching options because he can have like 150 passing yards and still have a great fantasy day. Tom Brady, if he has 150 passing yards and like 1 touchdown, we're not having a good time. So we need a pass catching option paired with them. And I don't mind, obviously, going with Chris Godwin. You can play Mike Evans, but again, he's more of a tournament play. Looking at some of these mid-range wide receivers, it's a pretty good week for these guys. We have T. Higgins, Hunter Renfrow, Michael Pittman. These are kind of like my 3 favorite. You can also throw in Brandon Cooks. I guess like my 4 favorite mid-range running back. So I guess we have like my 4 favorite mid-range wide receivers in a row here with Cooks, Higgins, Renfrow, and Michael Pittman. If you go down lower, you have Brandon Ayuk at $5,600. I think he's a pretty solid play with no Deebo Samuel this weekend. Going even lower, we have a really good value play, assuming he gets activated off the IR because he has been practicing all week. We have Devontae Parker at $3,900. In the games he's played this year, it's only been 5 total. He's had 7, 9, 7, 9, and 11 targets, and not too bad at fantasy days. He's only $3,900. I think he's a fantastic play this weekend, assuming he gets activated off the IR. Now, obviously, that could always not be the case, but I think that's the assumption as of right now. And also, if you want to spend up a little bit more, you might have to go more punting with the defense position, or we're already punting at tight end, or at least I'm planning to. So not sure if you'll be able to make this work, but I love Keenan Allen, especially if you're using Justin Herbert. I like Jalen Waddle, 6,400 bucks. I love Devontae Parker is back. That will hurt him a little bit, but I still think they'll both be fine. But for right now, just to try to see what kind of money we have to work with, I'm actually going to move on to the tight end position. And if you're not using Gronk, who I think is the best spend-up play, him and George Kittle, I think you got to go all the way down low here to either Foster Moreau with no Darren Waller at 2,700 bucks, or you can go with James O'Shaughnessy at $2,600 with no Dan Arnold. I will say Foster is going to have the most ownership here. I'm currently projecting him to be the highest owned tight end on the entire slate. O'Shaughnessy is coming in like a third of the ownership, so if you want to get leverage in tournaments, I think O'Shaughnessy is definitely a very solid play, but since we're kind of building towards a cash game lineup, we're just going to plug in Foster Moreau here, just stepping in for that role. Derek Carr likes his tight ends. I think he's totally fine. That leaves us 4,400 bucks left. I'm going to plug in a defense just to try to get this out of the way, because I'm personally not playing to punt with defense this week, and I know I typically do that, but I'm not finding any defenses I like to punt. And I definitely think the best option here is the Dolphins facing Mike Glennon. Like, I thought the Dolphins were a decent defense to use even if Daniel Jones was playing. Now that Mike Glennon's starting, I mean, I don't really have any fear of anybody on this Giants offense. But Kadarius Toney's doubtful. It's just going to be an ugly day for the Giants offense. And I know it's a little bit expensive for me at defense at 3,300 bucks, but we're going to plug him in because there's just nothing down low that I like. And if we go that route, that's going to leave us around $5,000 left for the last two spots. And we'll probably have to go mid-range here because I plugged in like a Keenan Allen, which I would love to play Keenan, but that's only going to leave me 2,400 bucks left, which is just not possible because 3K is the minimum at wide receiver. So we'll probably have our picks of any of these mid-range wide receivers. I also want to mention Jalen Waddle if I didn't talk about him earlier, although I think I did mention him. But I'm actually going to plug in Devontae Parker, and then whoever fits at the end, we'll just plug in there because I think anybody's fine. So assuming he plays, we already talked about him, but I mean, plenty of targets in the games he's played so far this year. I realize he is always an injury risk, but that's going to leave us $6,000 left for the last spot, and that would leave us with anybody we wanted. If you wanted to play Chase Claypool even versus Baltimore, it's a good leverage play off all these chalky wide receivers. Cooks, Higgins, Renfro, Pittman, take your picks. I would say Hunter Renfro and Michael Pittman are probably my two favorite options here. The problem is with those two, you're kind of doubling up on your team that you already have. So you already have Foster Moreau, then you're going to add Hunter Renfro, so you'd have two pass catching options for the Raiders, but at their prices, I think it's fine. You can play Michael Pittman, but you already have Jonathan Taylor. But I mean, those guys should probably get the majority of the touches in this offense. T. Higgins, if I had a Charger stack like Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen, I'd probably be more inclined to go with T. Higgins just as a run back option. But it's probably more of a tournament play there. Obviously, you could play Brandon Ayuk if you wanted. If you wanted to upgrade Jamal Williams to a guy like Eli Mitchell, that would be $600. So it'd be, I mean, you might be able to put in a guy like one of these cheaper options. But many ways you can go here. Now, like I was saying, I did want to try to go with a Cooper Kupp lineup instead of a Jonathan Taylor. So if we take Taylor out, it shouldn't look that far different, but we're going to plug in Eli Mitchell instead of using Jonathan Taylor, which obviously frees up a lot of money, around $3,000. We're going to plug in Cooper Kupp versus Jacksonville, who's currently 32nd DVA versus the pass, and he just does not really have a bad game. He's had a couple of games closer to 10 points, but that was week 4 versus Arizona, 11.4, and week 5 versus Seattle, 16.2. Besides that, the guy's been crushing it each and every single weekend, around 10 plus targets, and usually around 100 yards, and typically likes to find the end zone. So we're going to plug in Cooper Kupp. I really think it's between either spending up for Jonathan Taylor or Cooper Kupp this weekend. If we go that route, leaves us $5,350 for the last two spots. So we're going to plug in Devontae Parker again just because I really like that value. If he happens to not play, it's going to suck because a lot of my builds kind of hinge on Devontae Parker playing because he really opens up a lot. So if we plug him in, that's going to leave us $6,800 left. I think like a Deontay Johnson's probably around that price point. That's typically where he's priced. Yeah, $6,800, Deontay Johnson. Baltimore has not been that great versus the pass this year. He's going to get you like 12, 13 plus targets each and every single week. It's never fun playing a guy in the Steelers, but I mean, the volume he gets, and the guy's a very talented wide receiver. He has one drop in the season compared to last year where he was dropping each and every single pass that went his way. So that's actually not a bad looking lineup if you happen to go the Cooper Kupp route. So you'd have Tom Brady, Eli Mitchell, Antonio Gibson, Cooper Kupp, Parker, Johnson, Moreau, Jonathan Williams, and Dolphins defense. Although another thing we could do, which actually would probably make more sense since we have Tom Brady as our quarterback, and like I said, we probably have a pass catching option with him. As much as like Deontay, you could just drop down $200 and get Chris Godwin in there, which makes more sense correlation wise. But like I said, this is a pretty fun week, and there's definitely a few ways we can go. I think in cash games this weekend, it's either spend up for Jonathan Taylor, you spend up for Cooper Kupp, and you kind of build from there. But obviously that does depend on a few things. Devontae Parker happened to not get activated for some reason. that would hurt a little bit because he kind of really opens up some value in our lineups. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the video, and I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become a fish member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Optimizers, ownership projections, cheat sheets, and all the players, all the data, all you'd ever want, link can be found down below. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks, just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you're new sign over there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think that'll be it. I'll stop rambling. I'll see you guys later for the core plays video posted around like 9 p.m. tonight.